Rafael Bain and I were sitting in the hotel restaurant, having breakfast and making small talk. We were both probably mentally calculating the hefty commission we'd be getting when the executives of Zimantu Inc. signed off on our company's software proposal for $12 million that Wednesday morning. After that, we'd be flying back from Wichita, Kansas to Indianapolis, Indiana, and then I'd drive home to Fort Wayne, where I'd enjoy another great dinner cooked by my wife at 6:30 p.m. Not many men have it as good as I do, I thought as I took a sip of coffee. I had a beautiful wife, 47 years old, but looking 10 years younger, who was a fantastic cook, and, of course, a huge commission coming my way. Life was really good, and then my damn cell phone ruined everything with its incessant ringing. I looked at the caller ID and then back up, causing Raphael to look up with concern too. The caller said he was from the Ohio State Highway Patrol. I was pretty sure I didn't know anybody in Ohio. Les Kendall here, I answered like any other business call. How can I help you? I heard a gasp and then a young, hesitant voice on the other end of the line. Mr. Kendall. This is Sergeant Michael Derwitz with the Ohio State Highway Patrol. Your wife, Emily, was in a serious car accident and has been taken to the University of Toledo Medical Center. The voice went on for another minute or so after he told me that my wife was in the hospital, but honestly, all I heard was wah, wah, wah. All that mattered right now was getting to Toledo. What's going on, Les? If you need any help, just ask, Raphael quickly interjected. Emmy's been in a car accident near Toledo. I've got to finish up the paperwork on this deal, and I need to get to my wife. Got it, I said as quickly as I could. I'm on it. You go see Emmy. I'll let the office know what's happened. Good luck with everything, he replied. I literally ran back to the room, grabbed my suitcase and belongings, and called the airline to change my flight back to Indianapolis. Wichita wasn't a big hub, so there weren't many flights from there to anywhere, but I was able to get on a 9:45 flight back to Indy. Fort Wayne has its own airport, but there are no flights from Wichita to there. Knowing it would be about a 9-hour drive to Toledo, I called my wife's parents from the car first and told them what was going on. They live in Pittsburgh and could get to Toledo in about 4 hours. Then I called our son at the University of Georgia and our daughter at the University of Colorado and told them what I knew, which wasn't much. It was my son who first wondered out loud what my wife was doing outside of Toledo early that morning, when she was supposed to be teaching in Fort Wayne that day. No clue in the world, Jake. No clue in the world. I guess I'll figure it out when I get to the hospital, I told him. Your grandparents are on their way there. I'm guessing they'll call me when they figure things out. I pulled off the highway about halfway there and called the hospital. First, I endured the automated operator's bingo game, and then I got jerked around by the emergency room. I hung up and called my father-in-law. What's the scoop, Dad? I'm not getting any response from those damn staff people when I call, I said. It's not good, Les. She's in a world of hurt, he said. Apparently she got hit by a truck. She's pretty messed up. Lots of people are running around. All we know is that she's holding on. I was probably an hour away from the hospital when my father-in-law called back, sobbing uncontrollably. He could hardly talk, but I understood that he was telling me Emily was gone. I pulled off to the side of the road, turned off the engine, and burst into tears. My wife of 24 years, my best friend and confidant, was gone. I must have cried for 15 minutes before I could regain my composure and get back on the highway, though at a much slower pace. I called both of the kids and told them the bad news. They were as heartbroken as I was. My in-laws and I embraced in the room with Emily's body when I got to the hospital. She looked awful. The doctor came in and told me that she had died from very serious internal injuries, although she also suffered multiple broken bones, cuts and bruises. A state trooper found us after a while and gave us the details of the accident report. The accident occurred at about 5:45. Emmy was driving westbound toward Fort Wayne on US 24. Admittedly, my brain was very foggy at that point, but prompted by my son's question, I was somewhat confused as to why my wife was outside of Toledo at 5:45 when she was supposed to be in Fort Wayne teaching at 8 a.m. The trooper didn't know either when I asked him that question. I noticed both sets of in-laws seemed surprised, though my father-in-law's surprise seemed much more intense. My in-laws followed me back home to Fort Wayne and the kids flew in. We took turns calling friends and relatives to spread the sad news. The funeral was set for 5 days later. I think we all cried enough collectively to help fill 3 rivers in the Fort Wayne area. The kids and my in-laws left 2 days after the funeral. My parents stayed an extra day. So then I wandered around the house like a zombie for 2 days before deciding to start living again. God, she was a beautiful woman. I remember looking into those big brown eyes one last time on Monday morning when we kissed goodbye before I went to the airport and she went to school. I was on the road about once a month, and one of us always called the other every night when I was gone. She told me on Tuesday night that our house always felt so empty when she was home alone. Now it was my turn to be home alone, every night. I took a sip of Angel's Envy Rye whiskey as I sat reminiscing about our last conversation. Then Jake's voice in my head cut into my thoughts. If Emmy was home alone at 9 p.m. on Tuesday when I called, why was she outside Toledo early Wednesday morning when she got into the accident? The police had used the driver's license and Emmy's wallet to find me on the day of the accident. They had given me back both her wallet and her cell phone, but I didn't touch either of them for weeks afterward. They were both sitting on the kitchen counter where I'd placed them when I got home from the accident. Honestly, I had never looked at my wife's phone before because I trusted her completely and would never think about violating her privacy. After I charged her phone, which had run out of battery, I was surprised to find that it was password protected when I tried to open it. I hadn't used her phone for a while because I had my own, but the last time I knew it didn't have a password. Not that I'd have a hard time figuring it out, since I was pretty tech savvy and knew all of her important dates and events. Skimming through the messages, someone named Simi. What kind of people name their kids Simi anyway? Valentine had almost as many recent messages as her best friend, Rita Hawthorne, so he was the first person I checked out that person's messages. I didn't have to look any further. The two had texted each other multiple times, seemingly every day, for months, probably longer, but I stopped texting after a while. The only gaps in the texting seemed to be when I was away from home. The messages were all flirty and suggestive, boyfriend and girlfriend at best, lovers at worst. I felt both nauseous and angry as I read more. I had no doubt that Emmy was having a hot and heavy affair with this guy. Damn, I never saw any signs. Was I that clueless or just too trusting? I guess, at this point, did it really matter anymore? After I finished with her phone, I turned to her wallet, gently emptying the contents onto the kitchen counter. The only thing that caught my eye was her keychain. It contained a car key, a house key, and a key with Covington Arms 265 written on it. I had no idea what the Covington Arms was, so I went to my good friend Google and discovered that it was a high-end apartment complex in Toledo. Damn, she had the key to another man's apartment? I didn't see anything good coming from that. I worked until noon the next day, then took the rest of the day off and drove to Toledo. Arriving in the middle of the afternoon, I strode into the lobby of the Covington Arms like I owned the place and took the elevator to the second floor. Figuring the resident would be at work by this time, I used the key and walked in, and knew immediately that Simi, Valentine, and my late wife were more than just friends with benefits. A quick glance showed me several Thomas Kincaid collectibles throughout the entryway and into the living room, and I knew they were either bought for Emily or by Emily. Our house also had more than a few such adornments. I walked around the apartment, taking in everything. I could tell it was a man's place, but a woman had spent time there. I noticed a few feminine toiletries in the bathroom, but the most telling sign was when I checked the closet and dresser in the master bedroom and found more than a few pieces of Emmy's clothing. Even though I knew at this point what I was going to find, I was still saddened to see it all. I went over to Simi's refrigerator and found several bottles of Corona, along with an uncut lemon, which I quickly cut into usable slices, and they sat back down to wait for the man of the house to return from his pastor duties. He walked in the door at about 4:20 and nearly pissed his pants when he saw me sitting on his couch. Then recognition dawned on his face, followed quickly by anxiety. Holy shit. Something's wrong, isn't it? I knew it. She hasn't answered a text or call in 2 weeks, Simi said, not bothering to introduce himself or wait for me to say anything. I was shocked that he seemed to know who I was and didn't seem afraid that I might stomp him out. Maybe because of that, I thought I'd give him the benefit of the doubt to start. She's not texting or calling because she's dead. She died in a car accident 2 weeks ago. While driving home from here, I growled. His face turned a sickly shade of white before he let out a howl like a wounded animal. He fell to the floor and started sobbing uncontrollably. I was stunned into silence by the sheer grief. He just kept on like there wasn't a strange man sitting on his couch drinking beer. He wailed for 5 minutes before I heard his cries subside. Hey man, you want a beer? I already cut the lemon, I offered. He looked at me like I had two heads. "I know it hurts, buddy. I've had 2 weeks to get used to it," I said. I grabbed us both a beer and handed him one. He just looked at me, waiting for an explanation. I took a sip of my beer, then gave him the rundown. He listened intently, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I don't know," he choked out. "I'm so sorry, Les." My name came out so easily from his mouth, like he knew me. He could see my surprise and annoyance. "Of course I know who you are, Les. Emily talked about you all the time. She called you the love of her life," Simi said. "But why you?" I whispered. "If I was the love of her life, why did she need another man?" I think he gave me a sheepish smile. He looked down at the carpet, then back at me. "She didn't need another man," he said. "She was my angel. She helped me get back on my feet after my wife died of cancer 5 years ago. I'm a teacher too, and we met at one of those teacher workshops. My wife had passed away a few months before that. Emily was so easy to talk to. She got me going again. We kept in touch after the workshop, and when she told me that you allowed her to be with me on occasion, I was truly amazed at your kindness. We always tried to be discreet so she would come here, usually when you were away on business. But it wasn't just sex. We had a great relationship. She called me her second husband. She always said you were the love of her life, but I was just a pretty good apprentice. I was even happy to be considered as such." I was completely taken aback. I had never given her permission to do anything like what she had done. "I never gave her permission to be your part-time wife," I practically yelled. "I would never allow her to do that. She was lying to you, straight up." "Oh God," Simi said quietly. "I even asked her again just to be sure after she told me that. She confirmed it for me. I just figured." "And you just figured I was one of those guys who was cool with Cool's wife having relationships with other men?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. No, he replied quickly. "I just figured you were one of those super confident guys who didn't mind his wife getting a little extra on the side." "Definitely not me," I said emphatically. "I'm sorry, man. Really," he said. "I totally believed her. I wouldn't have gotten with her if she hadn't told me that." "And so you and she have been doing it for the past 4 years, at least 2 days a month, sometimes more, I guess," I said. "Yeah, and during the 5 days of the education workshop every July," he said. "We both had separate rooms, but we only used one room for the whole week. That was probably the only time we weren't really discreet. Usually there would be 1 or 2 teachers from her school who knew what we were up to. But nobody ever ratted me out. I wonder if she told them she had my permission," I said. He shrugged sheepishly. "By the way, how old are you?" I asked. 31, he replied. "Damn," I said. Even though he was 16 years younger than the kid, I had no doubt that I could clean his clock because I was bigger, stronger, and meaner. However, I truly believed he was telling the truth about Emmy telling him that I had given her permission to have sex with him. As much as I wanted to revenge myself on Simi, I knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. This was primarily on my late wife. "Walk me through how her visits usually worked. I need to know why Emmy was on the road so early," I said. Simi explained to me that my wife would often leave Fort Wayne immediately after her school day was done on the first day of my trips. She would then spend the night but would get up an hour earlier to drive the extra distance so she could get to school on time. Then leave again for Toledo at the end of the school day. She would repeat the process on day 2 and leave again for school on day 3, returning home to us from school that afternoon so that she was home earlier than I was by several hours. "Seems like a lot of driving for a little extra cash," I mumbled under my breath, more to myself than to him. "I'm not that bad," he said defensively. "She said she loved me. We loved each other. I was happy to be her second man." "Summers were much easier," he added. "Since we were both off for the summer, she would come here as soon as you left on a business trip, and then she would stay overnight until the day you were scheduled to return. And then for the past 2 years, you've given her 5 days off with me every summer. I always thought that was beyond the pale for a loving husband to do for his wife." I was initially confused by the 5-day vacations he was referring to. Then I remembered that Emmy and a few friends went to Mackinac Island in Michigan for 5 days last summer and the summer before. At least that's what she told me. The hamster on a wheel that was my brain was running at full speed to get everything he was worth at that point. Damn. She was even stealing time from me when I was home to be with her lover. I was completely powerless to fight back. We both sat in silence. His eyes were unfocused and he started crying again. I understood. I even felt a little sorry for the guy. It wasn't his fault that he had befriended someone who ultimately stole his heart, but lied to him as much as she had lied to me. We sat in silence for a few more minutes as we finished our beers. Maybe at another time and place we could have been friends. "Do you want to take her stuff back home?" Simi asked. "The only thing I want to keep is this photo of us. I'm pretty sure you don't want to keep it." I had overlooked the picture earlier when I was wandering around his apartment. It was a picture of them with Simi hugging her from behind, his arm wrapped protectively around her. Both of them were smiling broadly as they looked at whoever was taking the picture. They looked exactly like lovers. My heart sank even lower. "That's a nice picture, Simi. You can keep it and all her things here." "I don't want any of it," I said, trying not to let any anger creep into my voice. I got up and walked out of the apartment without even bothering to say a decent goodbye to him. The drive home felt like it took forever. Anger, no rage, was quickly replacing my grief. Emmy had lied to me and betrayed me for 4 years. She had abused my trust in her, and had disrespected me in the worst way possible. And the worst part was, I had no way to make her stop, the damn bitch. About halfway home, I focused on what I would tell my kids, parents, and the rest of the family. My plate was full of pain, and believe me, I really needed to share. Why was I the only one eating this meal? I've been told that one of my better qualities is my analytical nature. I've never really been prone to acting impulsively, especially when under duress. Some have criticized me for this trait, saying my calm under pressure was due to a lack of passion. In particular, I weighed the pros and cons of telling my kids that their mother was a lying whore. I knew both of them loved Emmy to the moon and back, but now I knew that she didn't deserve all that love. By lying to me and deceiving me, she had caused the disintegration of our family, which would now never happen because she was dead. She didn't cause the accident, but she shouldn't have even been there if she hadn't been cheating on me. Telling the kids would probably break their hearts and shatter their world, but by not telling them, I was essentially covering up her deceit and causing them further pain. Why was all this coming down on me? But being a good parent in my mind, meant protecting your children from as much pain as possible. When all was said and done, I knew I would take Emmy's betrayal to my grave instead of telling my kids. It would be painful for them to discover on their own, but not as painful as if I told them, you know what, blame the messenger. I was pretty sure Jake already had a gut feeling that his mom was really in the wrong place at the wrong time, for the wrong reasons. However, the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Because she died in a sudden accident, she would keep their love and devotion. If she hadn't died, would her cheating have been discovered? And then how would the kids have reacted? I guess we'll never know, so I'll just treat the kids right. My thoughts weren't as charitable toward the parents, though. I figured that with both sets, I could share my pain unfiltered, and they would have to swear never to let the kids know anything. I invited both sets of parents to a nice dinner at a favorite restaurant the night before the kids were scheduled to come home for Christmas. I thought my parents would be easier with my news, but would be there to help Emmy's parents through what I was sure would be the most traumatic event. I loved Ralph and Phyllis almost as much as my own parents, but I needed to unload some of my pain so I could heal and move on with the rest of my life. I had loved Emily with everything I had for 24 years. Then, in the space of 2 weeks, first I had to endure her shocking death, and then learn about her horrific infidelity during the last 4 years of our marriage. I had gone from the pinnacle of a near-perfect marriage with a near-perfect wife to the very bottom, discovering my late wife was a deceitful, lying whore, and that my marriage for the last 4 years had been a sham. So by this point I had spent months blaming myself for not seeing Emmy's cheating, and any role I may have had in contributing to her cheating on me. Obviously, I was doing something that caused her to get into bed with another man, so was I not fulfilling her needs? Was my package not big enough? I knew what Simi had told me her reason was, but I was just a normal guy, and getting cuckolded after 20 years together was painful as hell. From what Simi told me, Emily hadn't told many people about her infidelity. A couple of friends had spotted her and Simi at the workshop, and I guess the 2 friends she used as cover on shopping trips probably knew too, but it seemed my late wife was smart enough to remember the old adage about keeping secrets. Tell no one, but if you must tell the fewest people. Our home was always a festive hub of activity during the holidays when Emily was alive. We had 5 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and both the living room and den were spacious. This meant we usually had a number of people staying with us for multiple days and other family members coming and going throughout the holidays. Emily, being a teacher, always had a long Christmas break, was a great hostess and a fantastic cook, and she'd fly around the house like a supersized Christmas elf. The four parents and I had booked a nice Italian restaurant for the first night of our family get-together. The five of us were enjoying appetizers and wine with our first course when I tapped my knife on my wine glass to get everyone's attention at the table. AICHI. How many of you knew that Emily was having an affair for the past 4 years? I asked boldly and clearly. My mother dropping her fork onto her plate was the only immediate reaction I got. My parents and Emily's dad all looked horrified while Emily's mom just stared. The others didn't notice, but I did. I knew I needed to talk to my mother-in-law alone when we got home. I gave both sets of parents a fairly detailed account of Emily's infidelity as far as I knew it. My father-in-law, Ralph, tried his best to appear stoic in public, but I could see tears streaming down his cheeks. Emily was a daddy's girl, and I knew this must have hurt him almost as much as it hurt me when I found out. I needed that release, but honestly, I wasn't proud of myself after I finished telling my story. The drive home in my Escalade was mostly silent. One of the few things that was said was when I warned everyone in the car not to mention Emmy's infidelity to any other family members, especially the kids. I said they didn't need to know, but if they did eventually find out, I didn't want it to happen on their first Christmas without their mother. They deserved at least that much, and the others agreed with me. Looking utterly exhausted, Ralph and my parents all went upstairs to their bedrooms as soon as we got home. So before the three of them went upstairs, my mother-in-law told her husband that she would stay with me and have a glass of wine. As the others headed upstairs, I poured a glass of Cabernet for my mother-in-law and a glass of Glenmorangie 12-year Scotch for me, and we went into the living room. Phyllis Rogalski was still a beautiful woman in her late 60s, and because of that, I had always believed that Emily would hold on to her good looks for a long time. However, at that moment, Phyllis' face had gone deathly pale as she sat beside me on the couch, all intents and purposes studying the pattern of the living room rug. You knew? You knew? How could you let this happen? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me? I choked out, my voice a mere whisper. Phyllis took a sip of her wine and sighed heavily. She turned to face me but couldn't look into my eyes. She started to tremble and tears rolled down her cheeks. So from what Emmy told me, he was a really nice young man who was in a really bad way after his wife died of cancer. They met about a year after she passed away at one of those education conferences, and they hit it off immediately. She said she felt good about being able to get him to finally talk about it. My mother-in-law started. Emmy went to his place several times while you were on the road, and they would just talk for hours before one day she ended up kissing him. Not long after that, they got physical. She said she loved him, not as much as she loved you, Les, but she did have real feelings for him. And what did you do? Just sit there. Encourage her. Remind her that she was a married woman, a mother of your grandchildren. Snarled. They snarled. I guess I encouraged her. Okay. He was a handsome young man, and the kids were all in college, and when you were traveling, why shouldn't she get a little extra on the side? Don't tell me you never cheated on her on any of your sales trips, she said. Never. I never broke my vows, never. How could you even think that? I said hoarsely. I'm sorry, Les. I guess I was rationalizing the unthinkable, giving her an outlet. I was so wrong, she said between sniffles. So think about it, Phyllis, I continued. Maybe if you hadn't encouraged her, she wouldn't have gone down that road and she'd still be alive. Maybe you might have played a part in her death. I could see the wheels turning in my mother-in-law's brain. If possible, she looked even more distraught than she had a few minutes earlier. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, she looked me straight in the eye. I'm so sorry, Les, for any role I may have played in contributing to my daughter's death, and for her deceiving you. You didn't deserve her betrayal, and neither did I. Thank you for not saying anything at the restaurant in front of Ralph. I know you understood at that moment. He would never forgive me, and I guess I wouldn't blame him. Maybe I also need to apologize to your parents at some point in the next few days when I can see them alone. She got up, took her glass to the kitchen and went upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My kids came home the next day, and our first Christmas without Emmy went pretty well overall. I was served lots of holiday-themed foods and snacks, and during the holiday meal, pretty much everyone who was female and some of the men all made some sort of dish. Emmy's name came up constantly and lots of great memories were shared. Occasionally, I caught both sets of parents and Emmy looking at me. I was both surprised and relieved that my son never asked again about why my wife was on the highway near Toledo when she passed away. Emily's parents usually stayed with us until New Year's Day, but for some reason they went home early a few days into the new year. I was surprised by Ralph's announcement to me until I saw the bruise under my mother-in-law's eye. She said she had fallen the night before after drinking too much wine in the kitchen with my mom. I wished him a safe trip home and just nodded at her. It was the most acknowledgement I'd given her since she confessed to me. A couple of hours later, my parents came into the living room, both with smiles on their faces. My mother was holding a bag of ice in her right hand. "Never mess with a crazy mama bear," Dad said as he put his arm around Mom. "You know your mama always has your back." She gave that stupid bitch a piece of her mind when Phyllis told her mom what she had done. "Thanks, Mom. Definitely a killer, as far as I can see from a few hours ago," I said, chuckling. I waited until everyone went home after the holidays before I started redecorating the house. I gave the kids their choice of Emmy's belongings. I tried to give Jake her engagement ring, but he refused point blank. "I know. I won't give that ring to any girl I'm going to marry. It's tainted," he said, without further explanation but assuming that I understood him. Most of Emmy's other belongings were donated to the Salvation Army, although my daughter wanted her prized Kincaid collection. Things like pictures of her with the kids, they each took some. Any pictures that were just the two of us, the kids left for me, but after they left, I threw them all out, including the large wedding picture of the two of us that had always been hanging in the bedroom. Both kids noticed Emily's absence from our house when they visited. I had even replaced some of the furniture throughout the year. Jake had graduated and gotten a job on the East Coast, so he stopped by the house to get the things he wanted from his room. He stayed at home for 3 days before leaving to start his career. On his last night at home, he finally brought up the elephant in the room. He had hardly mentioned Emily for most of his visit, and I could see he was trying to distance himself from me a little. We had dinner and both enjoyed a beer afterward. "She cheated on you, didn't she?" Jake asked softly. "She was on her way home from her boyfriend's place when the accident happened, wasn't she? That's the only reason she could have been on the road at that time." I looked over and saw the remorse on his face. I chuckled, knowing that I had never seen that emotion from his mother during her time of deceiving me. "Yeah, Jake. For the last 4 years, apparently," I replied softly, as if he were asking. "She was driving home from her boyfriend's place when the truck hit her." "Did you know, before the accident?" he asked. "To no clue, Jake. But you're the one who made me think about it. When you first asked why she was there when the accident happened, after I got over the initial shock, I started to wonder the same thing. I knew when I checked her phone, but I decided to investigate on my own when I found a strange key on her keychain in her wallet. Turns out, it was to her boyfriend's apartment. I took an afternoon off and went there. She had clothes, toiletries, even some damn Kincaid stuff. Can you believe it?" I saw his mouth drop in shock. "You actually went to this guy's place? You could have been caught," Jake said. "Maybe, but I had a key that was obviously given to her, so." But the worst thing happened when he finally showed up. He greeted me like a long-lost friend. The bottom line is, he thought I knew all about Mom's activities. She told him that I allowed her to, and he thanked me. His wife died a few years ago, and Mom had saved him, he said. "So you believed him?" Jake asked. "Oh yeah." He answered all my questions too. Nothing to hide, even when I told him that Mom had lied to him. He apologized then, but noted that he completely believed her when she told him I had agreed. I considered kicking his ass just for the hell of it, but honestly, I would blame this one primarily on your mom. I never thought she was capable of doing something like this, I said. "So you're really angry at her?" "Still," he said, more than asked. "Her passing hasn't impacted your feelings, even though you were married for all those years." He looked at me expectantly. I just shook my head. If she hadn't died and I found out, I would have divorced her immediately, just like that. She cheated on me for 4 years out of the 24 years we were together. Dying doesn't give her a free pass in my heart, I asserted. "Sadly, I get it, Dad," Jake said. Marley came home after her junior year and was busy enjoying her final summer before starting her professional career after her senior year. But she had gotten an internship in public relations at a local firm. If she noticed that her mother's presence in our home was pretty much nil, she didn't say. I had received a 7-figure settlement from the company whose truck had hit Emily, and along with her life insurance proceeds, I could retire a lot better than I had originally planned. But at 48, I figured I had at least another decade before I hung up my spurs. The only problem was that I had no one to share my life with, nor any desire to find someone. Getting burned by Emily to the extent that I did had made me very wary of women in general. I admit that being home alone after Marley went back to college for her senior year got boring after a while. Initially, I didn't go out much because I didn't know how, that is, date. Emmy and I had been married for 24 years and together for 26 years, which meant the last time I had dated, people were arguing about whether oral sex was actually considered real sex. While I was trying to figure out how to date again, fate in the form of Sylvie Hellman called literally. Sylvie was one of Emily's closest friends from the school where she taught, so I didn't think much of it when she called me one evening about 6 months after Emily died. I figured it was one of those thinking about you calls, because we had run into each other several times over the years at school functions. I could tell Sylvie was uncomfortable as we exchanged simple pleasantries, but she settled down a minute later when she told me that she was calling to ask me out. I was surprised and flattered. Sylvie was my age and still an attractive woman with curves, long auburn hair that reached her shoulders and green eyes. She had been divorced from a cheating husband about 10 years before. Emily always bragged about how great a husband you were, and I guess I didn't want to see a good man go to waste. I mean, if you were ready to date, she said softly. The first date led to a second and then a third. The third date was significant because she invited me to her place at the end of the evening, and we both knew that sex was a possibility, so to speak. I didn't have to point out to Sylvie that it had been nearly a quarter century since I had sex with anyone besides Emily. She took the lead, but out of respect for me, I think she took things slowly and easily. 15 minutes later, I had brought Sylvie to the brink about half a dozen times with my fingers before sliding down her body and putting my tongue into her very wet pussy. She screamed an immediate orgasm, which only encouraged me to continue. I always enjoyed it when Emily got loud, and it was no different with this new woman. My tongue explored the inside of her folds. I sucked on her labia and stroked her clitoris, the last move causing her to clamp her legs around my head as her body started to buck. Her screams were muffled to me because her legs were so tight around my head. I had to pull my face out to get a full breath of oxygen before going back to work. She kept wriggling and screaming until I had to lay off for a bit and rest on her lap. Catching my second wind, I gently licked my way from her thighs back up to her neck, pausing for a moment before inserting my rock-hard cock into her steaming pussy in 2 strokes. We took a moment to settle into a more comfortable position, and then I slowly but steadily built up to a powerful, slow-motion, but non-stop, rhythm that led to 2 more orgasms before I finally shot off explosively inside her. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised how loud Sylvie was in the bedroom, considering how talkative she was outside the bedroom. After we lay in silence for a few minutes, she got back to normal, rambling incoherently as we lay facing each other. Oh my God, so good, Les," Sylvie exclaimed almost like a stream of consciousness. "I'm much better than Emily said you were. You can't believe she had both me and Simmy. What a lucky woman." I waited until she finally stopped babbling before I kissed her hard. Her eyes closed and she gave me a big smile. She fell asleep soon after, while I lay awake and digested what she had just revealed before I drifted off myself. We showered together in the morning, and I got her down again 2 more times. Then we went to a local Panera for breakfast. I could tell she was feeling what I called the afterglow, so I figured it was time to address the elephant in the room. "Emily actually said I wasn't good in bed?" I asked softly during a lull in the conversation. Sylvie blushed, clearly just remembering what she had told me the night before after sex. She looked around for a few seconds before facing me. "Yeah, she did," Sylvie almost whispered. "That's why Nancy and I encouraged her to do it when Simi first started flirting with her at the conference. She said that a lot, saying that you were a great husband, a great guy, but a terrible lay." She looked sheepishly at me, noticing the hurt on my face. "I guess we were wrong to encourage her, regardless of whether you were good in bed or not." "You think?" I grumbled. "She cheated on me for 4 years with you and Nancy encouraging and protecting her. I know about her so-called Mackinac trips with you guys." She blushed again. "At least I know she was lying about your performance in bed. You're great in bed, Les. I would do this all over again and—" She stopped mid-sentence as she looked at my face. "I screwed up big time, didn't I?" she asked. "I'd say both of you did," I replied. "You know she died on her way home from her lover's place. She shouldn't have even been there. Maybe she wouldn't have been there if you and Nancy hadn't encouraged her so much." Needless to say, there were no more dates with Sylvie. I started going out after work occasionally to a quiet Irish pub a few blocks from my house. They had great food and good booze, the kind that you didn't need to add anything to so that you could swallow it. Most of the crowd was probably 35 to 50 years old, doing pretty well financially, but there weren't a lot of single women there. I knew I needed to get out of my comfort zone if I wanted to find women to date. A couple of women in my office had offered to set me up with their friends or relatives. I had declined them for the first year or so, but I figured I needed help. I went into the office of our senior VP of sales, Jerry Holmes, who had previously offered to help me, and sat down in the chair opposite her desk. "Okay, I'm admitting defeat. I need help meeting women," I told her. Jerry smiled at me. "So you want me to fix you up or give you a list of names and numbers?" she asked as I fidgeted in my seat. "Where do your single friends usually go to meet men? Do you mind telling me?" I asked. "I can point you in the direction of a few places to do that," she recounted. She gave me a list of 5 places. I planned to hit them on the next 5 Friday nights. The first Friday night, I went to an upscale restaurant bar that had a classic rock jukebox. There were quite a few women there, but I only talked to 2 or 3 during the evening. The second Friday night, the establishment was actually a bar that also served food and had a small dance floor. I was sitting at the bar when a group of 5 women walked in and headed for a booth near the back of the establishment. I waited until their waitress took their orders before checking them out and spotting one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen in the Fort Wayne area. She couldn't have been older than 25, with long, jet black braids that reached her elbows, big brown eyes, and an angel's face. She wore a peach dress, which was low-cut to reveal a large bosom and only reached halfway down her long-toned, caramel-colored legs. I knew I had been staring for at least a minute before I could look away, and spotted a beautiful, curvy woman about 45 sitting right next to her. The two looked so much alike that I figured they could have been mother and daughter. As you might imagine, a gaggle of young men quickly flocked to their table, the stunningly beautiful woman being the target of most of the men's gazes. She quickly took one of the younger guys out to dance, and the crowd dispersed a little, leaving the other 4 women sitting in the booth. Seeing an opening, I walked over to the beautiful 45-year-old woman who was seated and asked her if she would like to dance with a slightly awkward but kind middle-aged guy. "Right on, where is he?" she said saucily, before breaking into a wide grin and taking my outstretched hand. I'm pretty sure half of my brain short-circuited because I don't remember much about the next 15 minutes. When I came to, she was sitting across from me at a 2-top table, her beautiful white teeth smiling at me, and her left hand was on my right. When the waitress came over and asked what we were drinking, my dance partner looked over at me and said she would have whatever I was having, so I ordered 2 Don Julio tequilas on the rocks. "I'm guessing you're not a tequila drinker. You sure about that?" I asked. "Positive," she said as the waitress left. "What do I look like?" "A beautiful, confident, divorced woman who's here to watch over her stunningly beautiful, single niece and her 2 pretty friends," I replied confidently. "Spot on. Do you take height and weight measurements too?" she said. "By the way, I'm pastel." I looked her up and down suggestively, raised my eyebrows and nodded. I'd say more maca, but I never argue with a beautiful woman. Pastel it is for me. She chuckled and grinned. Her voice was melodious. Her chuckle was adorable. "What about you?" she asked. "Absolutely smitten," I replied playfully. "I'm less too." "Oh no, you're definitely more than that," she replied quickly. "A lot more to see. How did you know I was divorced?" "Saba? Divorced?" "Easy," I replied. "You're gorgeous, not a kid anymore, and you're not wearing a wedding ring. A woman as beautiful as you would have been married by now. So you have to be divorced, or the biggest slut on the planet. So I'm guessing divorced. And you look enough like the pretty young girl at your table for you to be her mom. But hanging out with your mom wouldn't be good. So you have to be the cool aunt." She gave me a dubious look. Then she stared intently at my left hand, and I could see the wheels turning. "You're divorced too, because you're not wearing a ring either," she judged. "You seem to have a pretty good track record with your guesses, so I'm guessing you've been single for a while, and since you're a handsome white guy, I'm guessing you're a player." "Oh, I'm not sure whether I'm offended or not, but I'm definitely not a player. You're practically the first woman I've been out with alone since my wife died in a car accident almost 2 years ago," I said. She furrowed her brow at my statement. "I'm so sorry about your wife," she started to say, but I quickly interrupted her. "Should have been a divorce, but a truck ran her over on her way home from her boyfriend's place," I interjected. "That's how I found out she was cheating on me. This is only the second time I've been back on the hunt, so to speak." It turned out she was actually 45 and had a 25-year-old son. We must have talked for an hour until one of the other women sitting at the table with her and her niece came over and said that their group was heading home. Pastel got up and thanked me for the lovely time, then pulled a pen out of her purse and wrote her number on a napkin for me. I had gotten out of my seat when she did this, so she leaned toward me, put her hand on my chest, and gave me a light kiss on the lips. Her lips were so luscious and soft, her perfume was subtle but delicious. Her curly black hair covered our faces as we kissed. "Mem, call me soon," she purred. The young girl who was waiting for her raised her eyebrows in surprise. Pastel took her hand and the two walked toward the door. I stood there, mesmerized, feeling like I was 15 again and had just gotten my first real kiss from Susie Barlow. I finished off my remaining tequila and walked toward the door. As I went outside, I punched her number into my phone. "You like waffles? I know a great Greek diner that makes the best waffles," I said. "Then maybe we can hit the botanical gardens or play put-put, if you want to get your cute ass kicked. You know I'm in the car with 4 young girls, so keep your thoughts on my ass PG," she said with a chuckle. "Yeah, I'd love to have breakfast with you, and the botanical gardens sound pretty too." I heard the others laughing and yelling at her as she gave me an address so I could pick her up the next morning. I heard someone ask her if I knew she wasn't a virgin anymore, which made me laugh out loud into the phone. "He heard you, you bitch," she said. "The others in the car, don't screw this up for me. He seems like a good guy." "I'm a good guy. Ask me anything," I said, making her giggle. "This is what happens when you try to be nice and chaperone these kids. No respect at all," she said to both me and them. Maybe because I had been with Emmy for so long, dating Pastel was completely fresh and exciting, like I had been given a second chance to relive my youthful dating days. She was fun and funny, intelligent and witty and sexy and passionate, and we hadn't even had sex after 6 dates. So that was my doing, and she had called me out on it. We had been kissing like horny teenagers on her couch for quite some time, and I wasn't sure if I should make a move or not. Yeah, I know, lame, but it had been so long for me. Les, stop thinking and start doing. It's time," she said, looking directly into my eyes. I grinned sheepishly. I say. "Sorry I haven't been more aggressive, my love. You probably won't believe this, but I've only had 3 sexual partners in my entire life, including my late wife. Actually, only one since my late wife," I said softly. "Make it number 4, baby," she confirmed with a radiant smile. "I'm guessing you remember how to undress a woman." Thankfully, I still knew my way around a woman's body without needing a map. What I hadn't anticipated, however, was Pastel's strength, which was way beyond Emmy's. When I first touched her hole with my tongue, she screamed, jumped up, and wrapped her thighs tightly around my head. Her jump caused her upper lip to hit my teeth, but all I could do was whimper until I pried her thighs open enough for me to get a breath of air. Then she continued to ride my face like a colt, reaching her second orgasm before she screamed and jumped up again when I sucked on her clitoris like a frozen ice pop. A few minutes and 2 more orgasms later, I slid up her sweaty body and rammed my diamond-hard cock deep inside her soft, melting pussy. She came again a few minutes later, this time bucking me off her body. When she finished convulsing, I knelt up on the bed and started to pound her hard. 15 minutes later, she screamed one final orgasm and brought me to the peak with her. I think I might have pulled a muscle or something, because everything went black for a second or two as I came. A minute later, Pastel started getting out of bed, ostensibly to clean up, before I grabbed her arm, turned her back toward me, and gave her a passionate kiss with her dry, post-orgasmic fluids all over my lips and face. I didn't think she had ever tasted herself before because she looked surprised, then delighted. I pulled her closer to me and wrapped myself around her. "We're not done until we cuddle for a while. That's part of my connecting process," I said. "I like the way you think, Les." Pastel liked the way I thought so much that she agreed to marry me a year later.